Something we get asked about a lot is the role of conditioning in BJJ, in grappling sports, in wrestling, right? So whether you want to talk about the role of conditioning and work capacity in American wrestlers, in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu fighters, in Mexican ground karate artists, it's a massive role in their training. It's highly, highly important. So many fights in these different sports come down to your ability to maintain a certain level of work output as the fight goes on. It might be just being able to maintain a certain position so you don't give away a submission, or so you don't give away points due to losing position. And oftentimes people call this cardio. They'll call it your cardiovascular work. They'll call it a number of things, your work capacity, whatever it is. And what today's video is going to be is discussing the different elements of this kind of work capacity, or specific work capacity for that sport, and how you might want to improve it. You see the success of work capacity with those grappling sports and how it compares across other sports when you compare grapplers or grappling specialists to striking specialists, or different types of athletes within the UFC. So previously you would have seen Chael Sonnen, an American wrestler, coming into the UFC, being able to control the pace of the fight and really grind people down by having massive amounts of work output as the fights went on and as they went into later rounds. You'll now have seen Khabib do the same thing by dominating fights, by controlling the pace of the fight, being able to push people very hard to kind of match his work output, but also being able to slow things down when he needed to slow things down and smother somebody on the floor. When you see beginners taking up a sport like Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, you'll oftentimes see them really struggling with the work capacity element of it. So they have this combination of not having that specific work capacity, but also being very inefficient with their movements. And then every movement they do is labored. They might have to do 3 times more positions to get set up for a submission than somebody who might be much more experienced. So a question we get asked very frequently, probably a couple of times a week here, is how do I get better cardio for BJJ? How do I get better endurance for BJJ? Or else you'll get somebody explaining that they're maybe going into a competitive phase in their jiu-jitsu and they're trying to get fitter for it. We're going to discuss that now. So myself and Owen started BJJ back in December of last year. We're 6 or 7 months in now at this point. One of the defining things we found from BJJ was just how difficult it was in terms of that work capacity element.
So I think obviously, you know, any kind of intense work capacity stuff is always going to feel like a drastic change to you when you're not doing a lot of that. So a lot of different sports have different kinds of work capacity for them and how they feel in that particular sport. So for example, last night I did 9 doubles in the snatch, you know, in the space of 10 or 15 minutes with, for a lot of people, obviously the heavy weight. For me, it's like not even, it's reasonably moderate for sets and reps. But in that scenario, it's something that is absolutely no problem for me. It's taking literally a minute to maybe a minute and a half at the absolute most between sets and going through those and trying to make technical corrections and build up a lot of volume, and then move on to at least 4 more exercises after that. So in that scenario, you come into it and you have your sport-specific work capacity built up and you are A-okay. But then when you move to something like Jiu-Jitsu, for example, the demands for that are so much different. So, you know, the time under tension when you're trying to hold someone's lapel, or you're trying to go for repeated measures or repeated attacks or repeated takedowns or defensive repeated takedowns. For example, in weightlifting, you have these nice segmented blocks where you go, okay, I'm ready for my next set. And sometimes you might stray into the realms of, if it's snatch and clean jerk, you might do sets of 3. This might take place over the course of maybe a minute if it's triple and clean and jerk. If you are, for example, someone who's not diligent, but between the reps, you could say a double might take you 5 minutes, but we know that's bullshit. But in that scenario, we know we've got plenty of time between the next set, and unless we're doing something like an EMOB, we've got plenty of time. We can relax, we can compose ourselves, we can go, okay, it's been 3 minutes, I'm ready to go again and hit my next 2 reps, and then I'll sit down again. Or for example, these vary across people, but the most important factor, that, or the most interesting point of that, is you're always in control of when you're going to go again. But for example, when you're rolling, you know, you start off with 5-minute rounds, and most gyms will roll with 5-minute rounds unless you're doing longer as you get later into the belts. You know, you have those 5 minutes and you have to keep it up for those 5 minutes. If you're not putting pressure on someone and expending more energy, someone's putting a lot of pressure on you and you're expending more energy to defend that. And then if you get out of that particular situation where someone's putting pressure on you, you then have to keep that on. So it's vastly different to any other sport I've tried, you know, and I've done a lot of field sports. I've done cross country, which I came last in on that 5k. It's the intensity with the conditioning feels even different to the most intense kind of CrossFit WODs. CrossFit WODs have their own sort of intensity. You know that phrase fire breather comes from. A lot of times you'll see, for example, you know, Jiu-jitsu coaches will be like, oh yeah, we had a load of CrossFitters come in and they thought they were all that and they weren't able first. And I think that's a little bit unfair to the CrossFitters in that scenario, because it is a different sport. While they both need a lot of intensity aerobically and anaerobically, and there is muscular endurance, it's just very, very specific things that you haven't done, you know.
I think as well, it's that thing of never having done that before. Most people will have gone, and even if they're starting CrossFit for the first time, they'll have lifted some weights, they'll have done some running, they'll have done probably some sort of high intensity interval training at some point in their life. They'll have a rough idea what that feels like. Very few people will have the idea for what another person's arm around your neck feels like, and you trying to hold on for 5 minutes. Even like the 5 minute on 1 minute off structure isn't different. It's not different in any other way from what a lot of interval training pieces will be. It's just the actual task itself is very different, and that like inability to control the pace of the task is certainly very different.
I didn't find the fight pressure to be something unfamiliar, I suppose, because I've done obviously a lot of martial arts in terms of, you know, taekwondo and some kickboxing. So the pressure of someone putting that on you wasn't something that was in any way novel for me. So I didn't find that hugely different. I assume from rugby it probably wasn't a huge difference.
No, not at all.
It's
the competition element was the exact same as training.
Yeah.
I didn't
going to competition. It felt exactly how I thought it would. The most interesting thing at competition was the huge crash of kind of adrenaline after the first round, you know, and I wasn't very, very nervous or in any way nervous. I was quite excited, I was interested, and I was engaged with the competition. You know, I wasn't apathetic or anything like that. I was very excited to do it, but I wasn't in any way, I didn't feel like I was going for example like a max clean and jerk PB or something. You know, I felt quite level. But it was very interesting. After that was still the adrenaline dump where the conditioning came down, and as you saw with Fitz, obviously in that competition he nearly died.
Yeah, I think the other thing you'll see is in jiu-jitsu, it takes a couple of months for that conditioning to feel like it's improving. I think if you've done it before and you just take a break, it'll come back after like a week or 10 days. It will come straight back. There's no issue with you feeling like you have to do 2 or 3 months of conditioning before it comes back. It seems to come back quite fast, and in talking to other people, they seem to get it back quite fast. But just starting off, it can be a bit of a shock to the system.
So now on to the specifics of cardiovascular endurance work or aerobic capacity, or your cardio for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or as I like to call it, Mexican Ground Karate, because I think that's a very fucking funny name. So a lot of times people make the mistake when they think it's Jiu-Jitsu, they think it's just all cardiovascular work. They're like, your cardio, coaches will refer to it as your cardio not being good. People will try and be like, how do I build my conditioning for Jiu-Jitsu? But it's a little bit more nuanced than that. For example, that's why we see when people come over from different sports, you see people, maybe if you came from triathlons or CrossFit or field sports, you'll see rugby players come in who will still be training in rugby, for example, you'll see that, and they'll come in and they'll be absolutely gassed. And that's for some notable reasons that if you think about it for a little bit, you know, will make sense to you. So of course we have that level of conditioning, and we have this kind of slightly above normal VO2 max. Now you'll remember from a study we analysed, a paper we analysed in a pay-per-view video, that the level of VO2 max among these jiu-jitsu athletes wasn't drastically above normal. So it was high and it was trained, but in terms of elite athletes it wasn't anything particularly crazy. So your VO2 max is the max amount of oxygen you can utilize during exercise. So where does that kind of point us in a direction? So we have, what are kind of the other areas left open to us if it's not just only conditioning? So of course we have conditioning, that's a requisite. But what I think a lot of people forget is the specific muscular endurance you need for jiu-jitsu. So it's not only your conditioning and your aerobic capacity, you know, your lungs and your heart and how much oxygen you can pump and how fast that can pump and how well you can control your blood pressure, but it's also this local muscular and specific muscular endurance you have. For example, in your forearms, a lot of people will know the stronger you are, the actually a little bit worse it is for you when you come into jiu-jitsu, because your ability to maximally isometrically contract and squeeze someone's lapel or squeeze someone if it's no-gi and hold on to a joint is very, very high, because your ability to produce this maximum force is very high. And if you come from your weightlifting, for example, or deadlifting or powerlifting or something like that, Your ability to do this is quite high, but your ability to do high volume of this maximum isometric kind of contraction isn't very high, or this maximum grip or this maximum squeeze is very, very low in terms of what you need across the entire 5 minutes. Or if you're doing a large session, this could be 10 rounds of 5 minutes. Whereas, for example, deadlifting, a 1RM deadlift literally take 5 seconds, and total volume of time under tension there across one max deadlift or one weightlifting session is so much below what you actually need for a good session of jiu-jitsu. So what you need to do there is look at how can you build specific, or how can you get after, and how can you address this muscular endurance. So when you're looking at your training, don't just think it's my conditioning. Consider what areas you need to address for your muscular endurance for the sport of jiu-jitsu.
So when you look at energy systems and what energy systems are kind of being taxed or being drawn upon when you're training BJJ or competing in BJJ, most of the time you're looking at like the phosphocreatine system and the glycolytic system. Okay, so briefly, what are energy systems? So when we're exercising or when we're just living life as normal, we draw energy from 4 different systems, or we have 4 different energy systems. Some people will say we have 3 different energy systems, but it's all basically time related. So in the initial movement it takes me to move my hand up like this, I'm obviously not processing fat or processing carbohydrate to do this. What I'm using is ATP. Once it goes on a bit further, I'm using phosphocreatine. Once it goes on a bit further, I'm using sugar or glycogen. And then after that, I'm using fats. To explain this a small bit more simply, imagine you're a poker player. So you're a poker player sitting at a table playing Texas Hold'em. As you're sitting at the table, the money you have immediately available to you right now, the poker chips you're already after buying, are ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's present in the muscle. It will work right now. So as I'm dealt out a hand, I can pick up those first few poker chips and throw them. In the same way, whereas if I throw a punch, I'm just using ATP in its purest form there. Next, if we consider I'm sitting at that poker table and I have a wallet in my pocket. So that wallet has some cash in it. You can consider that cash to be the same as the phosphocreatine system. That cash can be exchanged with the dealer. I'll get chips almost immediately. And that's why the phosphocreatine system works in that initial kind of 10 to 15 seconds of exercise. It's very quickly. A pool of creatine exists within the muscle tissue itself. It's a very quick transaction to make ATP from that system. Consider then within that same wallet I've got an ATM card, and I just walk across the casino, I go to the ATM, I have a bank account there, and I can just pop my card in, I'll get some cash out, that can then be converted for chips. That's very similar to our glycolytic system. So this is when you have those kind of 400 meter repeats, when you have those still quite explosive and still quite fast and sharp initiations of movement. We're not going to be able to run on this forever. That glycolytic system is running off a pool of glycogen that's within the muscle, and it won't necessarily keep us going in the long run. Usually around half an hour is about the limit of it. But for a lot of our sport, we're relying on glycolytic systems. So it's like having an ATM card. Go to the ATM, get out your cash, and you can convert that to poker chips then. The last system is our lipid system. So we store fat in many different areas of the body, in organs as well as underneath our skin and in between our muscle cells. So imagine that this guy, whether it's Gerf playing poker or whoever, this guy is a full-time job. So he has to go to his job Monday to Friday. He racks up some money in that bank account, which you can withdraw with an ATM card. That long-term permanent job is the same as our lipid system. So we're going all the way through from money we can throw down right away to money that will sustain us over the course of the next few years. And that's the exact same as our energy systems. So for BJJ, most of the time, as you're initially starting off the fight, as you're doing those very explosive movements, whether they be takedowns, sweeps, whether they're trying to pass someone's guard, a lot of that is going to be just pure ATP being used, or if it's kind of a prolonged tussle, 10 to 15 seconds, that phosphocreatine system is certainly being pulled in here. In terms of things that are going to get you better at that, doing more explosive movements in the gym, having a higher 1RM number in the gym, all these things will allow you to firstly hold a larger pool of creatine within the muscles themselves, And you'll also be able to regenerate that pool of creatine faster if you're used to multiple explosive bouts in the course of kind of 5 to 10 minutes. For your glycolytic system, this is where most of us are going to be drawing most of our energy from during a bout of rolling or during a fight. That's why just going and doing kind of like triathlon training or 10Ks or 20Ks probably isn't the most ideal way. If you're very far out from competition, it's probably good. It'll be a nice little bit of aerobic capacity work. It'll work on that VO2 max that Gurf was talking about previously. It'll get you some favourable blood values, but it's not really the specific system we're going to be using during the fight. In terms of glycolytic system, will be very good for this. Will be 400 meter repeats, 600 meter repeats, 800 meter repeats, high intensity interval training bouts. All of these things be very, very good for training that glycolytic system. You're probably within the kind of 1 minute to 12 minute mark in terms of your brackets there. Obviously, we understand that all these systems are active at the same time, but mostly we're going to be using that kind of phosphocreatine system and the glycolytic system. The next thing that we have to talk about, obviously, is how you train this. We mentioned briefly how you might tap into each of those energy systems, but what is the most effective way to get better conditioning for jiu-jitsu?
So first, I think we should address the old donkey in the room in relation to Brazilian jiu-jitsu or Mexican ground karate. It is... So before we got to jiu-jitsu, I would have thought weightlifting is definitely one of the dirtiest sports in the world, but I was super wrong. Jiu-jitsu is the dirtiest sport I've ever seen in my life. So a lot of times I would have thought, like, why are they all so openly juicy? Or like, this person's clearly on gear, they're doing phenomenal shit, stuff like that. So essentially, jiu-jitsu is it's a difficult sport in terms of these demands on paper. So you need pretty good VO2 max. You need to be highly explosive, so you need a lot of fast twitch fibers. You need the energy reserves for this. And oftentimes these are very at odds, So when we look at things like high fast twitch fibers and a decent VO2 max, we don't really see these a lot together when people like it's not impossible, but it's something that definitely requires good genetics, good training, very diligent training to do. And this is not something you would automatically think would be possible for a lot of athletes, But we do see it a lot in jiu-jitsu. Now, fortunately, one of the things that performance enhancing drugs is it's very good at bringing up a lot of different attributes. And if you're already genetically talented and you train these athletes a lot, it will enhance what you're training. So it'll bring up all these attributes anyway if you take the right kind of drugs and you take them enough for long enough, and if you're talented enough and you do enough training, it allows you to circumnavigate this more intellectual side of training. Now, that said, the smarter way of training plus drugs would allow you to be an incredible athlete, So a lot of times you'll see jiu-jitsu athletes, fucking love them. Some of great friends from jiu-jitsu, not the most... They're not the best at getting out of their own way in relation to training. So a lot of jiu-jitsu athletes find it very hard to leave the gym and go do some strength training. A lot of times they'll find it hard to stop doing training to address an injury. A lot of times they'll find it hard to go conditioning. They'll feel like they're losing their ability to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because time not spent rolling is time where you're certainly in the short term just getting a little bit worse than where you are now, even though in the long run this would slingshot you forward into a better athlete. So a lot of times what this allows people to do is train just a shitload of jiu-jitsu and take a lot of performance enhancing drugs. So while this isn't really what we're telling you to do, we're not telling you should take performance enhancing drugs, but it is the kind of, I suppose it's the elephant in the room or the donkey in the room in relation to just understanding when you look at elite level BJJ athletes or you look at other athletes around you and you're wondering, Jesus, this person is really good, but they don't do a lot of other training. They don't go to the gym, but they're really jacked. And when they get me in a guillotine, I feel like I'm dying, stuff like that. So just be aware when you're looking at other people's training methods that the use of performance enhancing drugs allows you to get away with a lot of stuff, and especially when they're talented athletes. And make no mistake, while jiu-jitsu athletes might not make the best decisions for themselves as an athlete, they are certainly some of the most hardworking, intense athletes you'll see in any sport. So it's not to discredit BJJ athletes. In fact, I'm huge admiration for them. Incredible athletes, super athletic, fearless, very, very intellectually or sport smart when they're doing their movements. Some phenomenal people, but when it comes to making these smart decisions in terms of outside their training, it's not always the best. And this is why when you use a lot of PEDs or use any PEDs and you're doing jiu-jitsu and you're talented, you can get away with not making a lot of smart decisions.
So if you are to make a smart decision and you want to start training, you have to start looking at kind of where your particular deficits lie. I assume if you're 20 minutes into this video, your own deficit is probably in the area of work capacity, or that might have been an issue for you at some point. In that case, the first thing to do is obviously train jiu-jitsu as often as you can, right? You need to be rolling, you need to get the very specific practice and have very specific cardio element in there. The next thing you need to do is look at this kind of suite of areas that we consider to be work capacity within jiu-jitsu, whether that's your pure cardio, your VO2 max, whether that's something like your ability to maintain a quite high output for a long period of time. So maybe over the course of 60 seconds, can I do a certain amount of leg throws? Can I do a certain amount of double leg takedowns? Is that the kind of area I'm getting caught in? Or is it something like I can't hold the lapel for more than 20 seconds without it getting torn off, right? Or do I get really pumped in my forearms or lower back while trying to maintain a position and get out of someone's full guard? Wherever those particular areas are, you do need to do a small bit of a kind of audit on yourself and say, okay, this is where I tend to break down most. Maybe I'm great in the first round of rolling when we start sparring in the gym, but then come round 3, 4 and 5 I really break down. Or maybe I'm very good at the rounds where I have 2 or 3 minutes rest in between, or maybe I skip around and I have 6 minutes rest in between. But when I have to go from 5 minutes and then only have 1 minute off into another 5 minutes, that's where I break down. Once you start looking at this and once you start being a small bit more reflective on that, you can really start to focus on it. If it's something like the rest periods in between are quite challenging for you, then it is just lactic threshold, that kind of area of high work output and very, very little recovery in between. You can train these things in the gym, you can train them at home, you could use a stationary bike to train them, you could use kettlebells, sandbags to train them. The modality of training isn't that important, it's the actual thing you're trying to train and making sure you're honing in on that exact area of a deficit for you. That's by far the most important thing.
So probably the best way to sum this up is once you've addressed these areas, I think probably the final or the last mistake we want to talk about in relation to people making mistakes in relation to BJJ in their training is that they don't approach the actual BJJ training as a style of system. They don't have it as a planned progression. They don't have it as something that is like you would approach your weight training or you approach your sprinting or your aerobic work. You wouldn't just go balls out as hard as you can and then hope this will get better. I think the most important thing you can do is start thinking about your own BJJ as much as you possibly can. So BJJ is obviously almost always done in classes, so you need to be able to assess and put in as much autonomous control on this as you possibly can, while still of course following the class and not being kind of the odd one out essentially. So what you need to be able to do is think about your BJJ training, the actual time spent rolling, the volume and intensity you spend just rolling and sparring other people, like you would with your planned progression with weights, like you would with your planned progression in terms of your conditioning. So this is 3 of the most common kind of problems you see in relation to people's jiu-jitsu and their kind of general physical conditioning in jiu-jitsu. So I think we just want to say this here is like, we're not telling people how to get better jiu-jitsu and their sport specific stuff, you know, like we have so little knowledge on sport specific stuff in jiu-jitsu, but these are common problems that you can apply to as coaches who help people in a lot of different sports. These things, you know, are logical and make sense. So just in case anyone's watching this and they think that we're somehow trying to pass ourselves off as, you know, massively knowledge in the area of sport specific stuff in jiu-jitsu, but thankfully performance is something that we can help you with. And there's 3 things that we see commonly, we've experienced ourselves and we see other people having issues with in jiu-jitsu. We want to just look at in jiu-jitsu session solutions and in gym solutions. So the first one, grip fatigue. I think everyone has had this one, where at the end of your session you're sitting down and you look at your hands and your fingers are like this and you've got little T-Rex arms and you're like, how am I going to drive home with this? And then next day you wake up and you can't even straighten your elbow and there's like knots down here and it's pretty yucky. It's not great. So what you want to do with this, the most important thing in jiu-jitsu session, so this says limiting output, but that is don't go to failure with your grip. Don't get to a point where your grip just completely is gone, where you literally can't move your hands. The pump is so intense that you've just literally can't even move your fingers anymore. That's really important. And the reason you don't want to do this is because if you get to failure, then you can't really do any more productive volume. Now, if your grip strength or your grip endurance is so low that you can't even do a full session with normal amounts of grip strength or normal amounts of gripping, then technically that is failure for you. But if you have a normal level of grip resilience and grip endurance, this is really important. Be conscious of this in your sessions, that you're not getting to a point where you're going to failure, because you want to be able to do the rest of your gym sessions or the rest of your rolling sessions. You want to be able to do as much gripping as possible. What's more useful for you is not one maximum session of rolling in relation to your grip, is as much gripping as you possibly can, so you can build up that local muscular endurance in your forearms and your biceps to a lesser extent. So that's the really important thing there, is get as much volume in as possible. And by doing so, you're making sure you're not getting to failure. You're not finishing a session where you're just gripping someone's lapel or pants for as long as possible. You don't yet have that solution, so make sure you're not getting to failure in your sessions. That's the most important thing. Then we have the in-gym solution. The in-gym solution is just general training, and that's pretty useful. So not using straps, doing deadlifts, pull-ups, chin-ups, dumbbell rows without straps, kettlebell holds without straps, bottoms up kettlebell presses, you name it, bicep curls. All of these things are just general, and this general nature of gym work transfers over into your jiu-jitsu. So just general strength training will definitely help here. If you do both of these, you build up volume gripping in your BJJ sessions, and you have strong muscles, upper body muscles, forearms, biceps, shoulders, upper back, then these will be super beneficial for you. So that in-gym solution is just do some stuff in the gym, and you'll get a long way to benefiting from that. Number two is the thing I think a lot of people get, is that the high intensity rolls are things that absolutely destroy you. You know, there's some 18-year-old who's been doing jiu-jitsu for 10 years. You think he's on SARMs, but you can't quite prove it to anyone, and no one will believe you even if you think he is. But you're rolling at him and he's going at a ferocious pace. Maybe he came over from wrestling, maybe he came over from judo or something like that, and his conditioning is high, he's really fast, he's really talented, and he's making shit of you. And his intensity is something you can't match. The first thing in jiu-jitsu is don't avoid it. That's really important with this one, and this is one of the few ones where we're saying you should go face first into this in the gym if you don't have these other problems. So if your grip is fine and your ability to do a whole session in jiu-jitsu is fine, then when it comes to this high intensity where you're not able to match it, is you gotta match that intensity. There is no real kind of huge super compensation from your normal rolling into this high intensity rolling. Now, obviously, take the advice of your coach and anyone else involved in jiu-jitsu who knows well. Like, if they don't think you should be doing this, then listen to them, of course. But if you feel like things are progressing well, but you feel personally you can't match that intensity with this person who can bring a lot of intensity, then your option, your in-gym solution in relation to your BJJ gym solution, is you gotta just face up to them and get after that rolling sessions, and you just gotta match it and try your best to do it. And eventually, if you didn't get your stuff right, you will get to a stage where you can match that and you will get it up. So main thing with this, gotta face it up to it and do it. Now, in gym stuff, this is where these kind of, you know, your UFC training videos or high intensity or HIIT or Tabata sessions come in really handy. These are where these are super useful, where you do Tabata on a assault bike, where you do Tabata maybe hill sprints or something that people don't utilize enough, rowing, maybe a little bit of skipping or something like that. So high intensity, high volume, high movement aerobic things as hard as you can for a couple of seconds, rest a little bit, hard again. So this kind of interval style training with maximum or close to maximum intensity, somewhere in the kind of 80 to 90% range. So that's where that in-gym stuff comes in handy, that kind of intense training. If you like that style of training, and I know some people do, and they're lunatics, but some people do like that kind of training, this is where you will really get a benefit, and this is where you get the green light to go and hit that stuff. You know, that like, even those stupid sledgehammer slams and stuff, they will give you some benefit here. So that in-gym stuff, HIIT, Tabata, nobody knows, but that high intensity stuff, that is where this comes in handy, and you can go fuck up that 18-year-old. So on this one, just a thing of note for the exercise selection for your high intensity training is your heart rate needs to be super, super elevated. We're talking near heart attack levels of elevation. So things like deadlifts won't really get there. So it's got to be something that's going to make you really push that intensity hard, and you can only do that by doing something that allows you to do high volume stuff at a high speed, or as fast as you can do it. So to my mind, assault bike always comes in here as one of the top ones and piece of equipment available in a lot of the gyms, thankfully. So high intensity, not high resistance, just high movement as fast as possible, as much as possible in a given time frame, and you'll get them. You'll get that 18-year-old. Then the last one is one I think a lot of people get if they're in and out of jiu-jitsu, or they've kind of just started jiu-jitsu, where they can't do all their sessions. There might be a lot of people watching this who've just kind of started jiu-jitsu and they can't even finish the hour and a half session, where by the end they're just kind of fucked. So in BJJ, the in BJJ solution here is you got to track how much you're doing it. And it's really important that we're always tracking how much stuff we're doing. Sometimes in martial arts, you just kind of get lost in the environment, you get lost in the community, you get kind of lost in this kind of, jiu-jitsu is a wedge kind of thing. Whereas you really got to understand jiu-jitsu is the same as any other physical movement, any resistance training you're doing in the gym, any consistency or any conditioning stuff you're doing in the gym. You've got to track how much you're doing it. You've got to intelligently progress through how much of that jiu-jitsu you're doing. So this bows the exact same smart progressions of this is important. If, for example, you can only do 4 sessions. 4 sessions puts you on your back. You're nearly getting sick. CrossFitters would call you a fire breather. This is where you need to be really smart with it. And unfortunately, you might take some slack from the other people in the gym, and that's okay. You're trying to do your best. Now, we're not saying don't train hard. You definitely should train hard. But in relation to this, if 4 is your maximum, then you need to do something like 2 sessions for a week over the course of however long your particular gym does your rolling. So if your gym does your rolling where it is the last 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, where it's just sparring, and obviously match the intensity that your coach is telling you to do, or your professor, as jiu-jitsu people like to call it. If you're given free rein to spar as much or as little as you want, and if 4 is your maximum, for a while, I just want you to do 2 good sessions. So roll once, sit down, compose yourself, relax, get your breath back, take a drink of water, then roll again. Good session, not absolutely balls out on these rolling. Make sure you're getting good quality and you're getting a lot of movement, but you're not getting to a state of failure where you're not able to do absolutely anything in that 5 minutes. So you're getting good sessions, you're getting good 5-minute rolls where you're getting a lot of productive work done in those. And if that's only 2 for a week or 2, that's okay. Next week then, you feel like 2 is very doable, you give yourself a little rest, and then you get to 3, and then before you know it, you'll progress on to these things. And I promise you, within 6 weeks, if you do this progressively enough, you could be doing up to 8 to 10 sessions of rolling very, very easy. Sooner, depending on your conditioning and how good a shape you're in general. So for this, match and be smart in those sessions and progressively increase the amount of rolling you can do in your BJJ sessions. So accumulate them over time, track your outputs. So remember how much you're doing. I journal all my weightlifting. Fitz journals all his jiu-jitsu. I also journal my jiu-jitsu and write down things, and this should be part of this thing you are doing so you can note what you're doing in future. So in gym, simple solution, just general conditioning. So not high intensity, so long, low intensity, steady state for as long as you can kind of feasibly do and make sense of your training. So this might be a stair steppers, this might be a stationary bike, this must be a walk in a slight incline, this might be rocking, this might be rowing, this might be ski erg, this might be swimming, whatever it is that allows you to maintain a steady pace, that kind of zone 2 cardio for a very long time. So just general conditioning. This is something you just have to dedicate time to with moderate frequency in relation to how much gym work you're doing, how much BJJ work you're doing. So get this in nice and steady. Take a couple of weeks to notice this effect, but once you get on top of it, you'll be able to maintain it a lot easier, and then you'll notice that in the gym. Finally, this last one. This is one we always talk about, and I don't think you talk about enough, but be in better shape. Don't be a fat fuck. This is really important. You would be shocked at how much difference a kilo of body weight loss will make to your VO2 max. Your efficiency in movement and how much conditioning you can do, how much fat mass you're carrying within reason, within a healthy level, is super important for your ability to do general conditioning work, to be able to do these kind of movements and this kind of aerobically demanding movements like this. So be in better shape in general. So this includes conditioning, this includes muscle mass, this includes fat-free mass, this includes the lack of adipose tissue or the right amount of adipose tissue for you. So if you are 5'4" and you're 105 kilos, chances are you're probably not in great shape. You know yourself, you're not in good shape. Everyone knows immediately. They're like, am I in good shape? I like what something Mark Bell has said, everybody is too fat, but some people are so fat. So if you are so fat, get in better shape, and this will make a huge difference to your ability to get your sessions in. Roll big sessions. The more sessions you can do, the more jiu-jitsu you can practice. The more jiu-jitsu you can practice, the more sport-specific stuff you can practice. The more sport you do, the more better you get at your sport. That's how all sports operate. Jiu-jitsu is just a particularly tough one. But the problems are no different to other sports. I hope this helps.